Chairman Bartlett and distinguished citizen hearing on disclosure panelists and my hearing colleagues. My name is Linda Moulton Howe. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, where my father, Chet Moulton, was director of aeronautics. One of his friends was Kenneth Arnold, who reported the unidentified flying objects over Mount Rainier in June of 1947, and a local reporter then coined the phrase UFO, unidentified flying objects. I remember my father dismissed the idea of extraterrestrials altogether, and that is the bias with which I grew up. I attended the University of Colorado in Boulder when I earned a cum laude Bachelor of Arts in English Literature, and I went on to Stanford University in California to earn a master's degree in communication, producing documentary films for the Stanford Medical Center. My master's thesis film was about the Stanford Linear Accelerator's first efforts to have computers analyze subatomic particle bombardments. From Stanford, I went to TV news at KNBC in Los Angeles, where my beat was science, environment, and medicine. Later, I was honored at WCVB in Boston as a producer, sharing the station's Peabody Award for Science and Medical Programming Excellence. Then I became Director of Special Projects at the Denver CBS affiliate, KMGH-TV. I produced, wrote, directed, edited, and reported a dozen TV documentaries about several live issues in the Colorado area and produced studio shows about science, medical, and environmental issues that earned 3 regional Emmys, 1 national Emmy nomination, and several other documentary film awards. I stress this only to say that when people address the mainstream media and those that are professionals not paying attention to this very important issue, that is not true. Many of us have tried. One of my documentaries was an investigation of the strange bloodless, trackless mutilations of animals ranging from cattle and horses to goats, sheep, pigs, and rabbits, and even wild animals such as deer, elk, and a marmot. Many of you may not know that the United States Forestry Department for decades has had photographs, I've seen them with my own eyes, of deer and elk with the ear, the eye, the tongue, the jaw flesh, the genitals, and the rectum cord out, all bloodless, but that is also kept as a top secret unless a reporter like myself ends up getting a leak from somebody who is inside the forestry department and shows me the photos. Now, these mutilations at the time that I was in Colorado in 1979 have been appearing in a series of repeated cycles since the early 1960s. And I came to learn that they were not confined to Colorado, but they were all over the United States, Canada, and other parts of the world. The first research interview that I did for that animal mutilation documentary was with former Logan County Sheriff Tex Graves. He told me bluntly on my first meeting with him, quote, "The perpetrators of animal mutilations are creatures from outer space," close quote. But he would not go on the record in front of a camera and say those words for a public to see. He said, "You will have to get somebody else to tell you that truth." And in fact, a few ranchers told me about beams of light from round or glowing objects in the sky that they had seen with their own eyes pick up cattle from a pasture or lure an animal to a pasture, dead with the same bloodless excisions. The beam transport would explain why there are no tracks, not even the animal's own tracks, around bodies that are found on dusty pastures that have no grass. The animals are found in what is equivalent to face powder with no tracks around a 2,000-pound or 1,800-pound animal that has an ear, eye, tongue, jaw flesh, genitals, and rectum removed without any blood. The documentary that I produced, A Strange Harvest, was awarded a regional Emmy. Home Box Office in New York City later contacted me to follow up on A Strange Harvest with an hour special for HBO with the working title, UFOs, the ET Factor. A contract was signed, and New York attorney Peter Gersten, who filed the first Freedom of Information request back at the end of the 1970s for information about UFOs, and his filing went to the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, the NRO, and other military offices. He arranged for me to have a meeting at Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. Mr. Gersten had received correspondence from an agent at the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigations about a dramatic landing of a disc and humanoid entities at Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. I was to go to a meeting at Kirtland Air Force Base and get the names, addresses, and phone numbers of some of the eyewitnesses of an exchange between our military security and something from this landed disc. But instead, the agent took out of a desk drawer a document of sorts, and handed them to me saying, "My superiors have asked me to show this to you. You can read it, you can ask me questions, but you cannot have this paper," and ordered me to sit in the middle of the room in order to read the document that he was handing me. Later, I learned that I had been both videotaped, audio taped, and photographed sitting in that chair, reading that briefing paper, and the responses and questions that I had to the AFOSI agent at the Kirtland AFOSI office that day, April 9th, 1983. The document had a title, all caps on a front page, quote, "Briefing paper for the President of the United States on the subject of unidentified aerial craft," and in this document, the phrase unidentified aerial vehicles was also used, UACs and UAVs instead of UFOs. The document gave a history of the US government's history of retrieval of crashed or landed craft in Roswell, Aztec, and Magdalena, New Mexico, northern Arizona, and northern Mexico south of Laredo, Texas, and a second series of one or more crashes in the Roswell area in 1949. The alleged presidential briefing paper also described information from a live extraterrestrial biological entity, the acronym is EBA, EBE, taken from a crash site near Roswell, New Mexico in 1949, 2 years after the historically famous 1947 July crashes of not discs, but my understanding is wedge-shaped craft that contained small humanoid bodies, both dead and alive. I was told that one of the first scientists brought in on autopsies of dead alien bodies was a herpetologist who studies snakes and reptiles. The skin and eyes of the non-humans were described as scaled like a snake's body, and the eyes had vertical slit pupils beneath dark protective lenses. Since April 9, 1983, I have witnesses and physical evidence that support that alleged presidential briefing paper shown to me at Kirtland Air Force Base, and I have been reporting about the hardest facts and evidence that I have been able to muster as an investigative reporter since then for television, for radio, and for books that I have done. Today, on April 29th, 2013, 30 years later, as a longtime TV producer and investigative reporter who produces the science and environment website, earthfiles.com, and also reports monthly for Premier Radio Network's broadcast of Coast to Coast AM in Los Angeles, I can, before you today, assert that the pressure of facts accumulated from military and intelligent eyewitnesses, from ranchers and pathologists, from pilots and astronauts, from fellow human experiencers in the UFO abduction syndrome, and from leaks by scientists and computer experts who have worked on back engineering extraterrestrial technologies extracted from non-human craft. There is no doubt that the United States government since World War II and the FDR and Truman administrations has known about the extraterrestrial interactions with Earth and that their policies of denial in the alleged interest of national security are still in effect. My greatest challenge as a journalist is to get on the record what I am told by military and intelligence agents and other eyewitnesses on the record. National security in what is supposed to be a democratic government of, for, and by the people is not served by lies and secrecy. Every American and the whole world deserves the truth about non-humans, past, present, and future, interacting with this planet. Thank you. Literature, and I went on to Stanford University in California to earn a master's degree in communication, producing documentary films for the Stanford Medical Center. My master's the idea of extraterrestrials altogether, and that is the bias with which I grew up. I attended the University of Colorado in Boulder when I earned a cum laude Bachelor of Arts in English. Chairman Bartlett and distinguished citizen hearing on disclosure panelists and my hearing colleagues. My name is Linda Moulton Howe, here in June of 1947, and a local reporter then coined the phrase UFO, unidentified flying objects. I remember my father dismissed I grew up in Boise, Idaho, where my father, Chet Moulton, was director of aeronautics. One of his friends was Kenneth Arnold, who reported the unidentified flying objects over Mount Rainier.